so this is Cornwall. Wasn't sure if the museum was open. It looks like the museum's open.
How's it going?
Good, man.
All right, first time at the museum?
Yeah.
Do you mind signing in on our guest list?
Yeah, no worries.
Where are you from? And,
Oh, is there like an admission?
no.
No? Oh, okay.
There's a little bit in this room about the foundation of Cornwall and kind of the roots too. The museum extends into this larger room through the hallway, and there's a number of exhibits upstairs as well. So
Okay.
I'm going to hover around.
Sweet.
If you have any questions at all,
Yeah,
hover
yeah.
at me. Otherwise, enjoy.
So the Loyalists came from the U.S., right?
Yes.
But I noticed it 1785 on the plaque there.
Yep.
But they were established already in the U.S.
So
it wasn't until later on that they were driven north.
it wasn't until 1783. So specifically in terms of Cornwall, John Johnson and William Johnson, his father, were out of New York.
Yeah.
So they were in charge of kind of a regiment under the crown called the Royal Yorkers, so the
Right.
first division of the King's Royal Regiment. So it wasn't until kind of that treaty signing in '83 that kicked them to Montreal, and then they wrote to the crown saying, "Hey, we need some land to settle on," which fundamentally became New Johnstown, then Cornwall.
Ah, right. That's why it's Johnstown.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's what that.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah. There's always some reason why. Yeah.
But they were based out of New York originally.
Right. Yeah, and then things got a bit sticky for the Loyalists during the War of 1812, around that period of time. And then they established permanently north of the border, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And actually, this building has, within the last 3 months, recently become the extended headquarters out of Toronto for the Loyalist Association. So you can still join the Empire Loyalists.
Yeah.
Really?
The sign Empire Loyalists. Cornwall City Council has a vendetta against heritage.
Really?
We had an enormous called Capitol Theatre. So it was a gorgeous theatre that was built in the 20s. That was torn down as well. Cornwall's history, kind of industry-wise and heritage-wise, is somewhat tragic, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, I was reading about it, and I'm like, why is there just like, why is there so little on this? There should be so much more.
And this hallway here kind of commemorates probably what was the worst thing to happen to Cornwall industry-wise, because we were like an enormous industry titan when the canals were open, but when they closed, so the parking lot used to be canal. So this stretch of canal was built to surpass the Long Sault Rapids, which is the main river stretch there.
Yeah.
But they backfilled, like where we're standing now onto the parking lot, they backfilled with landfill waste to build the Cornwall Seaway.
I was wondering where the canal was. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so when they built the Seaway, you have now all industry, all ships, all mills that were kind of on set on the canal, all the ships going through the Seaway, which goes completely around Cornwall. So,
Wow. Yeah.
again, neutered our...
Yeah, neutered. I like that. Yeah, that's a great word for it.
But I don't know if you saw the painting upstairs as well with the gentleman with the red coat uniform on, this guy.
Oh yeah, for sure.
John Baker. So he was a loyalist soldier and also the last emancipated slave in Canada.
So you guys have like a legit archive down there.
Yeah, we have.
Nice, man.
Right now, there's 3 full-time archivists because we have 250,000 negative photographs from different news organizations. So.
Wow, that's a lot. Yeah. Yeah, and you guys were big. It says here you guys had a lot of foundries, eh?
We had a lot of foundries.
Yeah, like
a lot of dairies. So originally, when it was founded, like when Sir John Johnson would have kind of plotted out the original land, it was called the Quarter-Mile Town because that was literally that square is the original Cornwall settlement. Everything, and you can see the map of the dairies in the other room too. Everything was in that walking distance of the quarter mile. But yeah, a lot of foundries, a lot of blacksmiths, a lot of dairies.
Hey, so we finished the Cornwall Museum. It was nice, but it's pretty sad. Apparently, there's not really there's no real urge to preserve the history here, right? So there was nothing really to see about any of the electric history of the city. Like Cornwall's electric history is it's pretty much buried, and there's not much to see in the museum. So I can't really show you guys anything, but I'm going to talk about some stuff. So I got a nice little view here. We're going to go for a little walk, and we're going to take a little talk about Cornwall. Okay, so this is the St. Lawrence River. In 1879, Thomas Edison demonstrated the light bulb in New Jersey. It was DC power. It changed lighting in the world, basically. Before that, it was all gas light, so wax or fuel-based gas to form a light, or it was arc lighting, which was basically a form of like high voltage conductors, and it creates an arc, like a welding arc, and that was what created light. Now, places like Montreal, Toronto, and Winnipeg actually had gas lighting infrastructure. So they had gas pipes and lamp lighters that would go light the lamps in the evening. In 1879, Thomas Edison demonstrated the light bulb in New Jersey. Then he was trying to implement electricity in an industrial way to sell it to people, right? In a commercial way. So what he did was he set up in 1882 a power generation facility in New York City and supplied power to, it was around 50 people at the start. Then in 1883, he came to Cornwall. But before he came to Cornwall, he tried to install his DC incandescent lighting system in Montreal and Toronto. The system failed, it was removed, and they stuck with their arc lighting. So a bunch of guys that worked at the weaving mill in Cornwall, which is a mill that weaves fabric basically, was the largest in the British Empire. So they said, well, why don't you guys come out here to Cornwall and right along this waterfront that we're currently walking, and you can try installing it. So Edison came up to Cornwall from New York. He and his crew installed 6 generators and 6 boilers. So they were steam-driven generators, steam-driven turbines that produced power, DC power, and there were 6. Edison came up to Cornwall to install the generators and boilers. They installed 6 generators and 6 boilers and 100 incandescent lights. The mill was lighted in April of 1833. It was a big event. A whole bunch of politicians, industrialists, factory workers were there. Edison turned the switch on, and the first industrial illumination in Canada was born. After that happened, Cornwall kind of was put on the map for electricity because it was the first place in Canada to have industrialized lighting in Canada. And this was 1883. So a couple years went by, and in 1887, the Stormont Electrical Company was founded, and they basically were going to supply electricity to Cornwall. So they wanted to get electric infrastructure started in the town so the whole town would have power and lights and stuff. But they had problems because in 1893 they had issues. The Cornwall Gas Company, which I was referring to for gas lighting, the electric company was worried that the gas company in Cornwall was going to take their money, right? Because of gas lighting versus electric lighting. So they actually bought out the Cornwall Gas Company and formed the Stormont Electric Light and Power Company. And then they started producing power in Cornwall. So much so that Cornwall had an electric street railway. It was initially called the Cornwall Street Railway. That was started in 1885. Not much came of that. For about 10 years, nothing really happened. And then in 1895 territory, they merged with the Stormont Electrical Company. They changed and formed the Cornwall Electric Railway, which was an amalgamation, and the Cornwall Electric Railway began service. And it was one of the first electric streetcar railways of the era, of the time. It was DC powered. There was a man who had been working on DC powered motors, and because Cornwall had DC power infrastructure, they decided that they'd implement an electric railway. And the electric railway was unique in that it was servicing the Grand Trunk. So the Grand Trunk Railway would come through town, and the electric railway would meet it in the train yard, and they would transport freight on the electric railway to the paper mill and the Canada mill, which was right next to the weave mill. The Ottawa and New York Railway also passed through the area. They also served them. So it was unique in the way in that it provided freight service and passenger service for both. And then it started to suffer. So they merged with the Stormont Electric Company in the 1900s because service was declining and it was hard. And the only way for them to get money for the operation to be viable was to merge with the Cornwall Electric Company, basically, the Stormont. So that sustained the railway, and it died out in the 70s. Basically, moral of the story here is it's a big, huge electric history. Edison was here, and there's not really much to show for it.